Welcome, folks, to this week's Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, Chris White, and this program is a program that comes to you live for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. And I like to say it's completely and totally unscripted, unrehearsed, and at times a little unpredictable. I am delighted to welcome this week's guest. He's actually a repeat guest. He joined me last year for one of these sessions, Mr. Justin Ryburn. Justin, my friend, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us again. It's good to see you. So Justin, you introduced yourself, when you were here probably, 6 or 8 months ago. But in the unlikely event, maybe we've got some folks joining that haven't met you before or didn't happen to hear you the last time. Do you mind taking a minute and introducing yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Chris. So my title is Director of Global Solutions Engineering with a company called Kentik Technologies, and we're what we call a network observability platform. What that essentially means is we have a software as a service, what the kids are calling SaaS these days, I guess, platform that allows our customers to look at all kinds of different visualizations and get proactive notifications of traffic that's going on in their networks, whether those are their own networks inside their environment or up in the public clouds. So that's what we do here.
That's what the kids are calling SaaS these days. I love it. Well, and by the way, I mean, you and I are probably about the same age. I mean, when I first got into this business, the early 90s, believe it or not, I was doing COBOL and CICS and DB2 on a mainframe for crying out loud. And there might be some people that, haven't even heard of those technologies. So, Justin, I know one of the things we're going to talk about today is leading a team through the stages of growth. I know when you started with Kentik Technologies, you had a smaller team, and I think even in your own words, you said, Chris, I felt like I could just sort of wing it. And then as you evolved, as you grew, you needed to put in place process and metrics and those sorts of things. So we're going to be talking about that. Before we get into that, do you mind sharing your journey into pre-sales? Because I think it's so interesting. So many of us have a different sort of path and journey into pre-sales. Do you mind taking a minute and just sort of bringing us, level setting on that start?
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And it's interesting because this kind of goes back to what you were saying. I'm going to show my age here a little bit. But when I first got into technology, actually, when I first graduated from high school and decided, what do I want to do with my life, I decided to pursue a degree in computer science. And I guess being, younger, I didn't know exactly what that meant. I thought I was going to learn all about computers. And what I quickly learned was C, C++, programming language called Ada, which probably nobody's ever heard of anymore. And I quickly realized I enjoy computer science. I enjoy writing these applications, but I also enjoy business and I enjoy people. And so it kind of pivoted a little bit, if you will, and actually got a degree in management of information systems, and then went on to get 2 master's degrees, one in business administration and another one in IT management. Again, wow. Kind of this combination of business and technology was a theme. I didn't know what pre-sales was. I would think, like most people graduating from high school and even, when they're in college, you don't really, it's not a well enough known thing, or at least it wasn't, when I was going to college to kind of pursue that as a degree. But I did know I liked technology and I liked business. And so that's kind of been the running theme, and is kind of where I got into this, this job description, I guess, if you will. Where I kind of learned about pre-sales, I was working for a networking company, and we acquired equipment from networking vendors, and they had this person called an SE who would also come with the salesperson. And that person was really useful and really helpful to me to really understand how that equipment all worked and so forth. And so I decided, this is actually what I didn't know existed, but what I really would like to do with my career, because it combines that technology and that business. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I've kind of been in it ever since. So
that's so interesting, Justin, because I had a very similar experience, and you've probably heard my story. I mean, I was 15 years into my career before I got into pre-sales. But like you, I used to sit through demos delivered by vendors and tools, that we were looking at. And to your point, there'd be the sales manager or the account executive, whatever he or she might have been called then, and then his or her sort of sidekick to give the demonstration and the technical presentation. And after a few years of seeing this, I found myself thinking, what's that person's job? I want that person's job, right? How do you get that role? Now, what was your first pre-sales role, and how did you specifically look for a pre-sales or a sales engineer job, or did you have somebody come to you and say, hey, you know what, we think you might be good in this? What was sort of your scenario?
Yeah. So actually, I guess if I think back, my first pre-sales position was at a company called Charter Business, which was the business commercial side of Charter, which is now called Spectrum. A buddy of mine that I had worked with at a networking company was over there running that team and recruited me to come work for him. And so, yeah, I mean, it was selling networking services to enterprise companies, but I just loved going out and like talking to customers and hearing like, what was working for them, what wasn't working for them, and trying to come up with a solution that we could bring to the table to solve those problems for them, right? Yeah. Being able to combine my networking knowledge with solving these business problems. And it was awesome. I left that position and went back into post sales just to get into another vendor that I was really excited to work for the company, but ultimately was always looking for an opportunity to move back into pre-sales because it's really what I have a passion for. Yeah.
Well, and I think for those of us who discover pre-sales or fall into it, as the case may be, and some people are very strategic in getting their first job, when you realize that it's really the perfect combination of maintaining your technical skills, demonstrating and using and leveraging your technical knowledge and skills, but then also having the opportunity to speak and communicate and engage with customers. I think once we find that, it's hard to look anywhere else. Now, at what point did you move into a management role?
So, over my career at Juniper, so I was at Juniper 10 years before I came to Kentik. And over the course of the years, I started moving into, I guess, call it kind of a team leadership position. Officially, we had an SE director that we were reporting to, but I was kind of the team lead for a number of different verticals over the last probably about 4 or 5 years that I was there. And then I guess officially got the management title here at Kentik. So this was actually my first official having people reporting to me leadership position. But
yeah. And how many people did you have when you first took over that role?
So there were 5 SEs on my team when I first took over the role. Through some attrition and stuff, we got down to about 3 SEs. This was all in North America, so we were covering the globe from the US, and then added an EMEA person, added an APAC person, grew the US. So kind of fast forwarding to today, the team is 15 people. Right now I have an SE leader in North America, I have an SE leader in EMEA, and then I have some teams that I have reporting directly to me at this point.
Yeah. When you first entered the management role, what in hindsight, were there mistakes that you think you made, or maybe things that you underestimated or overestimated? Like in hindsight, what were some of the key lessons from that early time as a manager?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all admit we've made mistakes, and if we had it to go and do over again, we'd do different things, right? I guess probably the biggest one for me is just learning to do the work through someone else, I guess, is the way I would phrase it. Like having been an individual contributor and having really, like we were just talking about, really enjoyed the role itself. One of my biggest struggles early on was to be able to take a step back and let the team kind of spread their own wings, right? I mean, for a number of reasons. One, I just love to do it, wanted to do it myself, right? So it wasn't a negative thing on them. It's not they couldn't do it. They're very capable. I'm pretty proud of my team. We have a really good team here, but I just love doing it myself. And what I realized was they need to be able to do it themselves, right? They want to, and me continuing to do it doesn't allow them to kind of take a front seat. And what I realized was when I gave them that space to do it themselves, they actually really impressed me. They did an even better, not that I had low expectations to begin with, but they actually even exceeded the somewhat high expectations I already had of how well they could do it. If I take a step back, and now I'm at a point where I actually did a customer call on Friday, and I was like, man, I miss this. Like, I don't get to be on customer calls, for good or for bad. That's what my team does on a daily basis, and I review a lot of their calls and our call recording software and stuff. But I don't typically get to be on customer calls, and it was like, man, I kind of miss this.
Yeah, no, I can completely and totally appreciate that. Incidentally, Justin, let me pause for a moment and just welcome anybody who may have joined. Folks, we don't have visibility into who's out there listening in. So if you care to say hello, I invite you to do so. By all means, if you have a question for Justin or a question for myself, please feel free to ask. We do this through a platform called StreamYard, and Justin, I found out a few weeks ago, I had Tony French, I think it was when I had Tony on, and I found out after the fact that the StreamYard connection to LinkedIn, I guess they had a problem with messaging.
Uh-oh.
We didn't get messages during the entire session, and I was surprised by that. And I found out after the fact. And there's our first hello. So I'll do a shout out to my friend Sanu. He is with DocuSign now. Sanu,
Nice.
It's good to see you, my friend. In fact, actually, Sanu comes to mind. He and I met shortly after he became an SE manager for the first time. And I remember he mentioned to me one time, Chris, there's such, I think, an allure, so to speak, to want to be the SE superhero when you first become the manager. Did you discover that when you were there? Also, I just got to say hello to my friend Brian Lewis. Brian, good to see you, my friend. And by the way, it's good to see that the LinkedIn messages are working.
For sure.
Let's talk about this. I think when we first moved from individual contributor to sales manager, I think we do have the tendency to feel like we should do everything. How did you avoid, or how did you grow out of that?
I think that's still a daily struggle for me. I'm not sure I have grown out of it yet, but I have to remind myself not to try to do that, right? To not to try to do too much, to prioritize and execute. I think, especially at a start, like Kentik, right? I mean, there's a friend of mine who's a mentor of mine, and made the comment to me when I was moving to Kentik. He's like, the thing about startups is there's like a million things you could do every day. What you got to do is figure out like what are the most highest priority things and get those done, right? Because you can't do everything all in one day. As far as like the superhero thing, I think this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like early on, I wanted to be on every call. I wanted to, be the Uber SE for the team that everybody came to and asked all their questions. And I still do a little of that, but I actually intentionally wait and watch and try and have the SEs answer each other's questions for each other, because I can't scale if every question has to run through me. The bigger the team gets, that just won't work. And B, that's how they kind of learn from each other and build, some of the more senior members on the team build their own sort of technical leadership skills, right? Being the go-to person that people can come to and ask questions about the product or how it works or what customers are struggling with from some of the technical things and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because I think we just from a good place, we have so much enthusiasm. We want to jump in, we want to help, but you're right. You got to give them space to grow and think for themselves and learn for themselves. So I think, and I appreciate the fact that you mentioned it's still sort of an ongoing challenge. And if I'm fully transparent, you mentioned, when you're in startup mode, there's so many things that need to be done or could be done. You need to channel your energies. Honestly, I'm in that probably in my own business right now. So, so that resonates with me a great deal. Now, I know you said that at some point you recognize that you really need to start putting some structure in place, some metrics in place, some process in place. How long before, you got to, or how long did it take you to get to that point where you said, okay, I need to start putting some structure and metrics in place? And where did you focus first?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was somewhere around the time when we started to add a management layer, right? Like, going back to the comment I think I made to you during our prep, early on I could just wing it, right? When I only had 5 or 3 or whatever the number was, people who were reporting to me, I could kind of know what was going on with everything, right? I joined enough calls and talked to them on a regular enough basis that I had a pretty good finger on the pulse of, what opportunities they were working on, where they were spending their time, what was working in the product, what wasn't working in the product for our customers. I mean, all of that sort of knowledge I just had in my head because I talked to the team often enough.
Yeah.
As we grew in scale and as we added a management layer, I'm like, people come and ask me about a certain opportunity. I'm like, I have a vague awareness that we're working on it, but I'd have to go back and review the calls this is probably before we even had call recording software to even be able to answer where we're at on a deal. Right. So I started to realize like I'm going to have to run this as a business, right? Like I can't continue to do this by gut feel and by winging it. So we started putting in, like I've alluded to a couple of times, we went and got, not just for me, but for all the revenue leaders, we went and got call recording software, which really helps us just kind of be able to replay what the team's doing well, what they're doing poorly, what customers are saying. It's been really awesome, honestly, for sharing tidbits with the product team, with marketing. I mean, there's all kinds of value to that. And just starting to do a better job of building some dashboards and tracking metrics. We're using Salesforce. I know there's a lot of tools out there that are specifically designed for SE teams. And I have evaluated a few of those. Probably will come a day here in the not too distant future where I'll need to adopt one of those. But for now, I'm getting by okay with what we can do with Salesforce, which we already have, which is obviously where our sales teams are in doing their work every day. So
yeah. So I have a couple questions for you. Let's start with recording. I'm really curious. How much time, say a week, do you typically spend in reviewing recorded calls?
Not as much as I'd like, right? This is one of those things where like you got to prioritize your time. I wish I had more hours in the week to be able to go back and listen to calls. A lot of what I listen to is when other people send them to me and they're like, hey, you really need to listen to this snippet for this reason, good, bad, or otherwise. This is a really important snippet for you to listen to. I do a lot of that. If there are big customer opportunities we're working on, I'll usually prioritize go and listen to a few of those calls, things like that. Yeah.
The other question that I had, you were saying, it sounds like you're currently using your CRM. Sounds like you're using Salesforce for tracking and for metrics. Are there specific metrics that you use to track your team? And it seems as though I have actually lost Justin. So let's see if Justin returns. As I said in the opening, these sessions are live and they are unrehearsed, unscripted, and unpredictable. So if I have anybody out there, if you care to lob me a question or lob a thought, please do so. Justin and I were talking about metrics. And the question that I was going to ask Justin is what metrics is he currently using? Some of you may be aware of this. I've been working with Kerry Sokolsky recently, and he and I have actually been studying and reviewing the tools out on the space specifically for pre-sales. And many of them are platforms designed to enable the individual contributors, the SEs on your team, to follow templates and playbooks and track activity and give management teams the opportunity and SE leaders the opportunity to actually track metrics based on what's happening in the field. And of course, many of them integrate with CRMs like Salesforce. In addition, we're also taking a look at a number of the demo automation tools that are out there as well. So if any of you are interested in getting some, some insights into what we've discovered in the context of our research. We'll be publishing the pre-sales buyer's guide in about a month. So in fact, you can go to presalesbuyersguide.com and find or you can actually sign up for our newsletter. And we actually did a webinar about a week ago, sort of introducing the guide and what we've done there. So if any of you are interested in doing that or taking a look at that, I welcome you to do so. Well, folks, this seems like it might be an abrupt end to the LinkedIn Live for today. Have not had this happen before. So unfortunately, it looks like we've lost Justin. So for the moment, I am going to sign out for now, and look for me next week when I come back for another episode of Tech Sales Advice. As I said before, the show for pre-sales leaders and pre-sales professionals that is unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. We'll see you next week.